talking of the birth of the new covenant from Ezekiel 18 verse 1 to 13. It's important to note that scripture because it's all about that. Okay, we're talking about what we are observing in Ezekiel 18, and we've talked about the context, and the context is that the Israelites were under God's judgment in that they were going to leave the land that God had given them. Okay? The land that God gave them. It was the promised land, the epitome of all the promises that God had given them. And now they were going to leave it. After just maybe about 400, 500 years. Okay? They were going to leave the land. So it's an important thing. But of course it was also going to be for just a brief period. They were going to come back after 70 years. Okay? After 70 years they were going to come back. But the important thing that is actually the good news here is that this was going to facilitate the change in the covenant. Okay? The old covenant is a covenant that God gave the Israelites based on the law of Moses. And of course, it's not that the covenant itself was bad, but the nature of the covenant is that it was very restrictive. Okay? It did not provide for salvation in any way, shape, or form. Okay? It was a covenant for just that nation of Israel within that land, and it was more of a legalistic covenant. Every nation on earth today, and we're going to be talking about that also today, has laws based on legalistic paradigms. Okay? Because it is to judge within that geography alone, within that national constitution alone, for those people alone. And that was the covenant. But God's desire was not a law in the long term. It wasn't for Israel alone. Israel was going to create its own system based on, yes, that very law. But God wanted to show them that, look, I am not just the God of Israel, but I am also the God of all humanity. Okay, and this is where we see the beginning of this throughout, from the book of Jeremiah through to Ezekiel. But Ezekiel, like we said in the last talk, is very important because he stands as the custodian of this process. Okay, with less responsibility, in that the law he was writing was not going to be a law that he would take responsibility for, just like Moses took responsibility for the law he gave to the people. But he was just a mouthpiece, okay? Because he was not a judge. Moses was a judge and he was a prophet, okay? But Ezekiel was only a prophet, okay? He was only a prophet. And for that reason, we see what is written in chapter 9, where the coals are put on his hand, okay? That he has no responsibility whatsoever on the outcome. Okay, so this is just what we see very clearly. And this all took place around 586 BC. Okay, about 80 years before Socrates. 80 years before Socrates. But we can say it is within almost the same 1 or 2 generations. Okay, around, they are actually born almost around the same time, but 8 years before Socrates. Okay? There were philosophers that had come before Socrates, like Thales, Anaximander, and Heraclitus. Okay? And these focus on the nature of the world. And we see coincidentally that was the same thing that God began with Ezekiel. Okay? He began by showing him the nature of the world. So we wonder. And these people lived at the same time. So this is just a thing. I don't know whether Ezekiel knew what was going on in the larger world. Okay? But for us that are looking back, this should tell us a lot of things. Okay? And we are almost like archaeologists that suddenly have come upon a truth. Okay? Tales Anaximander and Heraclitus focus on these things, the nature of the world. Okay? They try to describe it. And the same thing Ezekiel was also revealed. God revealed to Ezekiel the nature of the world. Okay? And this is very, very important as we see that modern Christianity must continue to understand these things and shift its theology. Okay? Away from the emphasis. Theologians, I'm sure they understood a lot of things, but the emphasis has been on describing the spiritual realm. Okay? Angels, all sorts of things. But God is more talking about his own nature, him. Okay? God himself. And how he created the world. Okay? And the nature of the world. And we are in the precipice of this discovery, in that we are able to see what Ezekiel saw. Astronomers are able to see it, okay? The way he saw it. Okay? Almost the way he saw it. So this is the issue. So we ask, is it an accident? Of course not, okay? It is just the beginning of the new covenant, okay? God is now telling the Israelites, look, I am God of the whole world, all people. I'm not just for you alone, okay? So it's not an accident. God was deliberately doing this. Next. So this is another powerful evidence of what God was doing, okay? And he showed this, the process continued that way. That while atheists use the Greek history to try to debunk the fact that Jesus was the source of the new world, we are asking the question, could it be that he was the one doing everything? Okay? They talk about the Renaissance, and this is one of the arguments they always use. Even using some of those historical facts and saying, look, it was those people like Thales, people like Anaximander, people like Heraclitus, Socrates, and Plato, that actually gave birth to the modern world. But is it really true? Okay? When you look at it from the theological perspective, you know that it is not. Okay? How come the biblical theology is matching directly with the historical facts? Okay? How come? How do you explain that? So this is the issue. And this state of affairs continued until a Jewish philosopher that himself was absorbed into the Greek world, because he was one of those people who never came back to Jerusalem, okay? After the return. He stayed in Persia and stayed wherever he found himself in the Greek world, okay? And at the end, he was based in Alexandria in Egypt. And he was known as a Greek philosopher, okay? But he was actually a Jew. And what he taught, and he lived around 20 BC to around 40, between the years 20 BC to around 40 BC. And what did he teach? There in Alexandria, he taught that whatever was true in the philosophy of the Greeks had been said earlier by the Jewish Bible, okay? By the Jewish scriptures. So that was his own conclusion, because he was a Jew, okay? And he was reading the Greek scripts by Socrates, Plato, and the rest. And he said, look, this is the same thing, okay? The same thing we have here. So that was his point of view. So these are not abstract thoughts. These are not things that people are reading thousands of years or hundreds of years after and then saying this is what happened, okay? This is what they said then, okay? And the thought just continued that way, okay? They just continued to interpret it that way. Because that is what the philosophers of those days said to us. Next slide. So Philo believed that the mediator between God and the world was the Logos. The Logos, and the Logos, of course, was described by Heraclitus. Okay? And Heraclitus felt that the world was controlled by a mind. It wasn't just an accidental explosion that created the world, okay? But that a mind, a very, very conscious mind, was dictating how the world worked. That's Heraclitus, and he wasn't a Jew, okay? He believed that. And he called this mind the Logos, okay? And what is the Logos? The Logos is the Word. And where do we see that? John chapter 1 verse 1, okay? In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, okay? And this is the issue. So, this is what we see. So, it was a very disciplined pattern of thought. But, another thing that we come to see, okay? This is between, we are talking about Philo and the Greek philosophers, okay? But we see something, and this gives us an understanding of the Immaculate Conception, okay? The Immaculate Conception, the virgin birth. Something happens. You know that Philo lived within the lifetime of Jesus Christ, okay? So Jesus Christ was born, and then King Herod the Great, heard that a child was born. So he embarked on a persecution of the Jews again, okay? Killing all newborn children from a particular age in his domain. And this resulted in Jesus Christ taken by his family out of Jerusalem, out of Judea, to Egypt, okay? And of course, where else would they have gone to? Alexandria, okay? They went to Alexandria and they stayed there until Herod the Great died.
Discover a transformative journey into the kingdom of heaven. Following the initial publication, the author dives deeper with two insightful follow-up books. Ever felt disconnected from God even in worship? Explore how God's unconventional ways can transform your life. How can you align with divine plans, avoiding distractions? Find answers in The Kingdom of Heaven on Earth and The Three, Illuminating Christian Truths and Prophetic Practices. Unlock profound insights guiding you toward a deeper connection with God. Don't miss out. Dive into this enlightening exploration today. Click the link on the caption to get your copy.
But then they came back, okay? They came back after Herod the Great had died. And Jesus Christ continued to live there. And he went for the Feast of Tabernacles. And at the age of 12, he was so intelligent and so knowledgeable about the law that he stayed behind in the temple and he was debating with, not with his mates, okay, but with the teachers of the law. And it was astounding, okay? So you ask the question, when he went to Alexandria, was he busy learning from Philo, okay? Why is it that Philo was teaching the same thing, okay, that Jesus later on preached, okay, about himself, okay? How? Then you wonder. A boy of 1, 2, 3, okay, probably that was the period of time he was in what? He was in Alexandria, okay? Of that age, would he have heard or learned from Philo, okay? That's the question you ask. So it is not so. Even by the time he was 12, I don't think he would have been able to. But it showed the divine, okay? This was all exposing the divine birth, the Immaculate Conception, okay? That no ordinary child can conceive of that. We have a lot of intelligent people in the world today. Some people may say by the age of 7, like I know, was it Elon Musk? He designed his first game, is that not? This man, this astrophysicist or physicist, what is his name, that got his first PhD at 13 years of age. He's now dead, okay? Because the intelligence, he had a condition, okay? Actually, some of that intelligence becomes a condition. Okay, and the truth is that human beings cannot surpass a particular level of intelligence without it affecting their physiology. Okay, because of the design that God has done. But we have a few intelligent children. Okay, but Jesus Christ was exceptional. For somebody to say that, look, I am God, okay, is another thing. To say that I am going to die and actually accept to die, okay, for the sake of the world is exceptional. So this is what we see. There is too much coincidence, okay, too much corroboration of the historical facts by the biblical theology, lending credence, okay, to the biblical theology. Okay, so this is what we see, very important as a Christian. How far can you push your science? This is the question. If you say that if I observe something in a microscope, okay, and I'm able to write it, this is how it happens, this is how it happens, this is how it happens, observable, okay, then you say it is science. If you observe a child behave like that, grow up and behave like that, is it science or not? Okay, this is the question. This is the question that I'm asking here. Okay, we need to understand, and many biblical theologians have said so. Okay, but they've not gone to this point. We need to understand that it is very scientific. The birth of Jesus Christ, evidence. We cannot know about the virgin birth, okay, but we can know the nature of the man. Okay, are you listening to me? Scientifically, we can't know that, but we can, at this time, of course. But we can know the nature of the man. We can say, this is what he did, this is what he said. Okay, and these words and actions and dates coincide to certain things that happened then. Okay, and these things give us evidence that there was a miracle that had taken place. Okay, that was beyond the normal. So this is just a simple thing. And you see it happening there. So let us continue. So God created and globalized the world. Okay, it was the globalization of the world was God's intent. That was his intention. Okay, it was deliberate. People study such things in the name of sociology these days. Okay, but in the Bible you see it is deliberate. It is actually deliberate action of God. And in the kingdom of heaven on earth, you see, I try to bring out those processes. Okay, how he did it socially, culturally, okay, and so on and so forth. So this is what happened. So the book of Ezekiel was one of the beginnings of the process of this thing, and in the book of Ezekiel you see another detailed beginning of this thing. Okay, how it all started. It started in Jeremiah, of course, but in Ezekiel there is a very detailed process that we cannot miss. Next slide. So there are 7 specific places in the Bible that it is stated that God will punish offenses to the 3rd and the 4th generation. But in this very scripture in the book of Ezekiel, he begins to reverse that law. Okay, he begins to reverse that law by saying that, look, everybody will pay for his own sins from that point on. No more will he punish generation because of the sins of the fathers. Everybody will suffer for his own sin. This is a very important theological concept within the process. Okay, without this, there is no new covenant. Okay, without this, we are still in the old covenant, and this is very important. So Ezekiel is given the same message that Jeremiah is given. So this is a repetition, okay? Almost the same words were given in Jeremiah chapter 31, verse 29. So it is repeated again in Ezekiel here chapter 18, okay? So no longer will children have to suffer for the sins of their ancestors, but each person will be responsible for his or her own sin. Next slide. This marks the official end of the Old Covenant. The Old Covenant ends here. Very important statement, because this is all about the Old Covenant. Okay? It ends here, and the New Covenant begins. Ezekiel, as opposed to the ministry of Jeremiah, is given the mandate of being the conveyor of this covenant. This is the beginning of God's plan to send Jesus and to spread salvation to the rest of the world. It's not just about saving one nation. That is why when you find when nations begin to fight, it was always about how to completely destroy the other nation, so that their own children will continue to fill the earth. And these are some of the things we are talking about. This is what is going to mark the 666, okay? This is what Hitler was fighting for. He wanted the Aryan race to dominate the world, okay? That was the problem. And this is what we need to understand about the 666. This is one of the things that's going to happen, okay? If the 666 is in power. We are at the threshold of the events of Ezekiel's time that begin the end of God's plan for global humanity. Next slide. Okay, so when we understand this, that we are at that threshold now, we will be able to be careful at the theology we espouse. Okay, we Christians, we like to preach to particular tribes, and we believe that the gospel must be heard within the context of our tribe, the people and tribe. But I tell you, there's a limit to that because of this. Praise the Lord. Because of this, there's a limit to that. The first contact, of course, is to talk to people in a language they understand, okay? And to be able to speak to their own culture so that we can transform the culture. But when we begin to go out of that, like we talked about, in the last two episodes, when we refuse to transform the culture and we leave the things that God is saying He does not want, we have not done anything, okay? And this is what some of the globalization that is not governed under Christ tries to do. It leaves the culture like that, and that results in the chaos we're having now. Okay, when they begin to say, no, we want to rape children, it is part of our culture. No, we want to stealing in our own culture is not wrong. So on and so forth. Okay, what do you do about that? There must be right, there must be wrong. Okay, there must be right and wrong, and this is what we need to understand. And when we understand this, we will be forced as scientists to go back to the Bible and say, is the Bible really just mysticism? Okay, is it just what do you call this thing? Superstition? Or is there some science in there? Or is it the science that we just look away from because it's just too much? Okay. When something is too much, we say no, leave it. Okay. That's the problem. It's just too much, so we say leave it. This is part of it. Now we see very clearly a process take place. Okay, right from the Greek philosophers, right to Philo, right to Jesus Christ, is a very clear process. There's nobody trying to hide the process. Okay, it's very clear. So it's wrong to claim that somebody stole from another person in that process. Yes, in this generation, I see people stealing from the Bible and hiding the source. Okay, but in that generation, it was very clear. And it wasn't an accident that Jesus left. God allowed the persecution so that Jesus would leave Jerusalem and go to where? It wasn't a good thing, but it was the nature of human beings, that we human beings are terrible. And that's one of the things that Jesus came to die for. Okay? So he left Jerusalem, went to Alexandria, where Philo was. Okay? And at the peak of Philo's ministry, that was when Jesus was actually implementing it. Okay? And he picked that scripture and he read it in the synagogue, and he said, what? I have come. And when he finished reading that scripture, okay, he said, what? As you are right now, you are seeing these things come to what? To pass. He wasn't missing words. He wasn't trying to be superfluous. He wasn't trying to be mysterious. He was just telling them, these words I'm reading, you are seeing it come to pass. It was as simple as that. And most of the time we take it as some very mysterious thing, as too much. And when we take it as too much, we now disbelieve it. Okay, instead of investigating it. Shabbat shalom. So that was.
Discover a transformative journey into the kingdom of heaven. Following the initial publication, the author dives deeper with two insightful follow-up books. Ever felt disconnected from God even in worship? Explore how God's unconventional ways can transform your life. How can you align with divine plans, avoiding distractions? Find answers in The Kingdom of Heaven on Earth and The 3, Illuminating Christian Truths and Prophetic Practices. Unlock profound insights guiding you toward a deeper connection with God. Don't miss out. Dive into this enlightening exploration today. Click the link on the caption to get your copy.
1, 2. Lord is my rock, my salvation, my hope, my soul in silence, wait for my God alone. He is my foe, I shall not be rebelled. He is my refuge, my tower of strength. Rescue shall come from my God alone, and I shall never be greatly removed. Still my soul in silence for God, my hope and refuge in my God alone. He is my rock, my salvation and strength. In God alone shall my deliverance be. How long will we take pleasure in sin? They mock and threaten the life of the King. Amen, amen, delighting in Christ, gathering faith, blessing, brother, mercy, godly. So may your heart for the less than a price, trust and rely on exaltation and gain. Kindness and power belongs to our God. He shall reward every man for his work. Hallelujah. Amen.